One of the things they vowed to do was to not erect trade barriers during this particular crisis period. According to the World Bank, 17 out of the 20 have taken protectionist measures in the period between November and today. So this is something to be worried about. And the reason I'm somewhat passionate about this is part of the work of my small think tank advocacy group, the World Growth Institute. So we're very much involved in this kind of thing, and I do believe that that global trade is beneficial to all countries, to developing countries, and to the United States.
Yes. As I heard you talking about grand conversation and Romer's theories, et cetera, that you espoused, it made me think of another theory that's called intangible assets. I think you probably know about that. Mm-hmm. It sounds like the same basic theory. The World Bank has gone very strongly into that, promoting it. The Milken Institute has gone into promoting that. Can you talk further about the difference between what you say and they say, or the similarities?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm somebody who believes that all human progress comes from, up here. I mean, not just from me, but from everybody's brain. It's the imagination that really drives progress. In other words, I mean, we've had iron ore in the ground for a long time. We've had coal and petroleum. These are very important resources, but it's only by figuring out, as Romer says, new ways to arrange them, ways to extract them, ways to refine them. That's all done by the human imagination that we get the kind of progress that we've had. And I think when you look at, for example, the balance sheet of a company like Microsoft or Google, maybe even a better example, or the kinds of telecommunications companies that I've talked about earlier, it's not, a lot of it is infrastructure and tangible, but most of it these days, and more of it, is intangible. That is stuff you can't put your hand on. It is stuff that it's patents, it's processes, it's ideas, it's new ways of arranging things. And that's really where progress is coming from. Now, we can't deny that things are important, and especially telecommunications networks. So things are important, but the arrangement of things, this is what Romer would say, it really is completely dependent on these intangible assets. And that's why education is so important. We need to be devoting more of our effort to improving our education. I'm not the first person to say that, by the way, but we can't ignore that. And I was actually having dinner with a friend of mine last night who happens to be a United States Senator, who was saying that we ought to be, and I'm not sure I agree with this completely, but that we just are not putting enough resources into education, because ultimately that's where the intangible assets are going to come from that will drive the economy.
Mr. Glassman, your arguments in favor of changes in the telecommunications industry in particular sound very reminiscent of the same arguments that we heard as to why we should deregulate the airlines and why we should deregulate the things like the Stegall bill that regulated separated investment banking and commercial banking. So I'm afraid I'm not following your argument. Perhaps you could give us a few concrete examples of where you see the roadblocks in the way and what the remedy would be in your opinion.
Fine. I don't want to get too deeply into the weeds here, because it is a very complicated subject. But let me just say this: I believe the government has an important authority to exercise in the regulatory sphere. I'm not somebody who believes there should be no regulation. But I think that regulation has to be up to date. It has to conform with changes that have come about through technology, consumer preferences, and so forth. And that, it just has not happened yet in telecommunications in most of the states. You know, you still have, in Ohio, if you look at the legal regulations today, you see 30 references to telegraph companies. Telegraph companies, okay? I mean, they're really, even today, even the use of the word, the phrase telephone company is not particularly accurate, and yet there's 71 references to telephone company. What the laws in many states, including Ohio, do is that they discriminate. They say, well, okay, here are the rules for this kind of business, mobile phones, let's say, or cable. And those rules are going to be different for telephone companies or wireline companies. We live in an era in which those distinctions have really been exploded, disappeared. And I think that's what I'm talking about. We just need to bring the regulations up to date. I am not saying that we need to get rid of all regulations, as some people argue, and I think quite cogently, regulations, for example, on levels of capital and capital ratios have been pretty much discarded over the last few years, and that has led to some of the problems that we see in the financial world today. I'm not saying that at all. We need consumer protections. We don't want to go way overboard, because the best consumer protection is competition. Competition drives down prices, and it also increases innovation. So that's basically what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland Forum, we have been listening to the Director of the World Growth Institute, James K. Glassman. Thank you, Mr. Glassman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
Thank you, Don.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.